The ballroom was packed with 200 guests when Dad stood to give his retirement speech. I sat at the back table, smoothing my dress for the 10th time, watching him adjust the microphone. My heart pounded with anticipation. After 35 years running Carter Mechanical, this was his moment. Our moment, I thought. He started with a joke about finally sleeping past 5 in the morning. Everyone laughed. Then he thanked Mom for putting up with his long hours. More applause. He praised my brother Kyle for being the pride of my life and taking over the family business. I smiled, waiting for my name. He thanked his business partners, his secretary, even the janitor who'd been there 20 years. My name never came. The speech ended. People clapped. Dad raised his glass for a toast, his face glowing with satisfaction. I felt my smile crack like thin ice. "Actually, Mr. Carter," his assistant Amanda spoke up, her voice cutting through the applause. "I think your daughter Victoria would like to say a few words too." The room went silent. Every head turned toward me. I froze in my seat. My father's expression shifted from surprise to something that looked almost like irritation. He cleared his throat and waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, Victoria doesn't have to do that," he said with a tight smile. "She's probably exhausted from all the party planning." Party planning I hadn't done. Mom and Amanda had handled everything, while I worked 60-hour weeks, keeping the company's books balanced. Every eye in that room was on me. The weight of their stares pressed down like a physical thing. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. Part of me wanted to sink into my chair and disappear. That's what the old Victoria would have done. The invisible daughter who never made waves. But something snapped inside me in that moment. I stood up slowly. My legs felt shaky, but I walked toward the front of the room anyway. Dad's jaw tightened as I approached. Kyle, my golden child brother, looked confused from his seat at the head table. I took the microphone from Amanda's outstretched hand. My fingers trembled, but my voice came out steady and clear. "Thank you, Dad," I said, looking directly at him, "for teaching me everything I should never become." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I was 7 years old the first time I brought Dad a drawing. I'd spent an hour on it during recess, carefully coloring a picture of our family standing in front of his repair shop. I was so proud of how I'd drawn the wrench in his hand. I knocked on his office door 3 times before he looked up from his papers. "What is it, Victoria?" His voice was tired, distant. "I made this for you." I held up the drawing, my small hands shaking with excitement. He glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds. "That's nice, honey. Put it on the shelf and close the door on your way out." I set it down carefully on top of a stack of invoices. The next day I found it in the trash. That became the pattern of my childhood. I'd show him my report cards with straight A's. He'd nod without really looking. I'd win the school math competition. He'd miss it for a business meeting. Meanwhile, Kyle could burp the alphabet and Dad would laugh like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. When Kyle broke Mom's favorite vase playing football in the house, somehow I got blamed for leaving it within reach. I learned early that being invisible was safer than being seen and disappointing him. By the time I graduated college with a degree in accounting, Kyle had already been working at Carter Mechanical for 2 years. Dad had created a position for him right out of high school, assistant operations manager. It sounded impressive, but mostly involved Kyle learning the business from the ground up. I applied for the controller position that had just opened. I had the degree, the certification, and I'd already been doing the books part-time during summers. Dad hired someone else, a man with half my credentials but 10 years of experience. "You'll learn more starting at the bottom," Dad told me over dinner that night. "Besides, you can work from home, more flexible for when you have kids someday." I didn't want flexibility. I wanted recognition, so I took the bookkeeping job he offered. From my apartment, I managed accounts payable, accounts receivable, and payroll. I caught errors the controller missed. I found ways to save money that increased their profit margins by 12%. Dad called it helping out. Kyle called it Victoria's little spreadsheet hobby. No one called it what it was, me keeping the whole financial operation running while Kyle learned to shake hands and smile at clients. The retirement announcement came 3 months ago, not in a family meeting or a phone call. I got a formal invitation in the mail, just like everyone else. Charles Carter cordially invites you to celebrate his retirement and the transition of Carter Mechanical to its next generation of leadership. Kyle's face was on the invitation, not mine. I called Dad that night. "You're really retiring. Time for the young blood to take over," he said cheerfully. "Kyle's ready." "What about me?" The question came out smaller than I intended. "What about you?" "I've been managing the finances for 8 years, Dad. Don't I get a say in the transition?" He sighed like I was being difficult. "Victoria, Kyle is taking over operations. You can keep doing the books if you want. Nothing changes for you." Everything changed for me. At the party that night, I overheard Kyle talking to a group of Dad's old friends. He was holding court, whiskey in hand, laughing about finally getting to run things the right way. One of the men asked, "What about your sister?" Kyle shrugged. "Vicky's better with spreadsheets than people. She'll be fine keeping track of the numbers. That's what she's good at." That's when I decided I was done being fine with being invisible. Back at the microphone, I let the shocked silence settle for 3 long seconds. Then I smiled, and it felt dangerous. "Let me clarify," I said, my voice stronger now. "My father is a hard worker. He built this company from nothing. He taught me that silence doesn't always mean weakness. He taught me that numbers never lie. And he taught me that sometimes the people closest to you can't see what's right in front of them." Dad's face was turning red. Mom looked confused. Kyle had set down his drink, suddenly alert. The guests weren't sure whether to be uncomfortable or intrigued. I could see Amanda in the corner, a small smile playing at her lips. "I've spent the last 8 years working for Carter Mechanical," I continued. "Keeping the books, managing payroll, making sure everyone got paid on time, including my brother, who likes to call accounting work a spreadsheet hobby." A few uncomfortable laughs rippled through the crowd. "But tonight isn't about me," I said, letting my smile widen. "It's about celebrating my father's legacy. So let me tell you all a story about loyalty, family, and what happens when you forget to look at the numbers." Dad started to stand. "Victoria, that's enough." "You're right, Dad." I met his eyes. "It is enough. It's been enough for a long time." I didn't plan to drop the bomb that night, but standing there with everyone watching, I couldn't stop myself. "Last year, I discovered something interesting in the company accounts," I said calmly. There were discrepancies. Small at first, a few thousand here and there that didn't match up between what was billed and what was recorded. The room had gone completely still. You could hear the ice shifting in people's drinks. I dug deeper, followed the paper trail. The missing money wasn't missing at all. It was being redirected through a series of complicated transactions that someone went to great lengths to hide. Kyle's face had gone white. Dad was gripping the edge of the table. "I brought my findings to my father," I continued. "Printed out everything. Showed him exactly where the money was going. I thought he'd want to know. I thought he'd thank me for catching it before it became a bigger problem." I paused, letting the tension build. Instead, he told me I was being emotional, that I was jealous of my brother's success, that I'd misunderstood the numbers because I wasn't experienced enough to understand complex business transactions. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, so I did what any good accountant would do. I documented everything. And then I resigned. The meeting happened in Dad's office on a Tuesday morning. I'd requested it formally through Amanda, which should have been his first clue something was wrong. I laid out the evidence across his desk. Bank statements, invoices, transfer records. 6 months of careful documentation. "Kyle's been moving money into a personal account," I said, pointing to the highlighted sections. "Small amounts, structured to avoid attention, but it adds up to about $75,000. Dad didn't even look at the papers. He looked at me with disappointment. "Victoria, your brother works hard. He deserves to be compensated well." "This isn't compensation, Dad. This is embezzlement." His face darkened. "That's a serious accusation. It's a documented fact." He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I think you're having trouble accepting that Kyle is taking over. This is jealousy talking. Look at the numbers." "I don't need to look at numbers to know my own son." His voice was hard now. "Kyle has been working in this business since he was 18. He knows operations, he knows our clients, he has vision for the future. What do you have? Spreadsheets and resentment. I gathered my papers with shaking hands. If you won't deal with this, I can't work here anymore. Maybe that's for the best, he said, until you can support your brother instead of tearing him down. I walked out of his office and never came back. I'd expected him to call within a day or two, to apologize, to ask me to reconsider. He never did. 2 weeks after I resigned, I got a call from an old college friend named Veronica. She worked at Anderson Industries, the biggest competitor to Carter Mechanical in our region. I heard you left your dad's company, she said. We're looking for a senior financial analyst. Interested? I should have felt guilty. Anderson Industries and Carter Mechanical had been rivals for 20 years. Dad had spent countless dinners complaining about that woman who ran Anderson and how she was always trying to steal his clients. But guilt required loyalty, and I'd learned my family's loyalty only ran one direction. I took the job. Miriam Anderson was nothing like my father. She actually read my reports. She asked my opinion in meetings. She promoted me to finance director within 6 months based on merit, not family connections. For the first time in my professional life, I felt seen. I didn't tell my family where I was working. When Mom asked, I said I'd found something in corporate finance. Technically true. Kyle didn't ask at all. He was too busy running the company into the ground with his visionary ideas. From my position at Anderson, I had a front row seat to watch Carter Mechanical's slow decline. Client retention was down, costs were up, and those financial irregularities I'd warned Dad about, they were getting worse. I told myself I didn't care. It wasn't my problem anymore. But I kept watching. The opportunity came 6 months before Dad's retirement party. Miriam called me into her office with a satisfied smile. "Victoria, remember that building where Carter Mechanical operates?" I nodded slowly. The building was an old converted warehouse my grandfather had leased back in the 70s. Dad had operated from there for 35 years. "The property owner just contacted us," Miriam continued. "He's ready to sell. Getting too old to manage commercial properties. He offered it to us first, since we're the biggest mechanical contractor in the region." My heart started beating faster. "How much?" she told me. It was more than fair. The building was in a prime location, well maintained, and the current lease with Carter Mechanical had only a year left on it. "I want you to handle the evaluation," Miriam said. "You know that building better than anyone. Make sure we're not getting a bad deal." I should have recused myself. Cited conflict of interest. Let someone else handle it. Instead, I said, I'll have a full report by end of week. The building was worth every penny. The lease agreement had a clause that the new owner could renegotiate terms after acquisition. Carter Mechanical would have to either accept new rates or vacate within 90 days. I recommended Anderson Industries purchase it. Miriam signed the papers 3 weeks later. At the retirement party, I held all this knowledge like a secret weapon. The building under our feet, the tables where everyone sat, the very space where my father was celebrating his legacy, it all belonged to Anderson Industries now. It belonged to the company where I worked, where I mattered. But standing at that microphone, I wasn't ready to reveal that yet. I wanted Dad to hear what I had to say first. I wanted him to understand what he'd thrown away when he chose pride over truth. "After I resigned," I continued, my voice carrying across the silent room, "I realized something. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn my father's respect, trying to prove I was worth noticing, worth thanking at a retirement party." I saw Mom wipe her eyes. Some of the older employees were nodding. They'd seen my work over the years, even if Dad hadn't. "But you can't force someone to see your value," I said. "You can only decide what you're worth and act accordingly." Dad's jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Kyle was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "So tonight, I'm not here to ruin anyone's celebration," I said softly. "I'm here for closure, to finally say what I should have said years ago." "That's enough, Victoria." Dad's voice cut through the room like a knife. He was standing now, his face red with anger or embarrassment or both. I looked at him, really looked at him, the man who'd been my hero when I was little. The man whose approval I'd chased for 30 years. He looked smaller somehow, standing there trying to stop me from speaking. "You're right, Dad," I said quietly. "It is enough." I paused. letting the moment stretch. Maybe next time you give a speech, you'll remember to thank the daughter who kept your business running while you pretended she didn't exist. The daughter who caught problems before they became disasters. The daughter who loved you enough to tell you the truth, even when you didn't want to hear it. Murmurs spread through the crowd. People were looking at Dad differently now. Questioning. Some of the employees were whispering to each other. "Enjoy your retirement, Dad." I set the microphone down gently on the podium. "You've earned it." I walked toward the exit, my head high. Behind me, I heard the explosion of voices as everyone started talking at once. Kyle caught up with me in the parking lot. "Vicky, what the hell was that?" I turned to face my brother. For once in my life, I didn't feel small next to him. "That was me being done," I said simply. "You just embarrassed Dad in front of 200 people. I smiled, and it felt surprisingly good. "You haven't seen embarrassed yet, Kyle. Trust me." He didn't understand, but he would, soon. I drove home in silence, my hands steady on the wheel despite the adrenaline coursing through me. My phone was buzzing constantly in my purse. Mom calling, Amanda calling, even a few texts from old coworkers. I ignored all of them. At my apartment, I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the city lights blur in the darkness. I'd done it. I actually stood up to Dad after all these years. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part felt hollow. This wasn't how I'd imagined his retirement. In my childhood fantasies, Dad would give a speech thanking me for my hard work. He'd acknowledge everything I'd done. We'd hug, and he'd tell me he was proud of me. Instead, I'd given a speech that burned bridges I'd spent 30 years building. My phone rang again. This time it was Miriam. "I saw the video," she said without preamble. "Video?" My stomach dropped. Someone posted it online. "Daughter calls out father at retirement party. It's getting a lot of attention." Great. Just what I needed. "Victoria, I'm calling to make sure you're okay." That took courage. "Or stupidity," I muttered. "Sometimes they're the same thing," she said. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be interesting." She had no idea how interesting. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The video Miriam mentioned had gone viral. Over 2 million views overnight. The comments were split between people calling me brave and people calling me disrespectful. I didn't care about the internet's opinion. I cared about the voicemail from Dad. "Victoria, this is your father." His voice was tight with barely controlled rage. "We need to talk. Now." I deleted it without listening to the rest. The next message was from Kyle. "Vicky, Dad's losing it. Call him back. This is serious." The third was from Mom, her voice worried. "Honey, please, your father is very upset. Can we all just sit down and talk?" I was composing a response when my phone rang. It was Amanda from Dad's office. "Victoria, I probably shouldn't be calling you, but I thought you should know. Your dad just got a certified letter from Anderson Industries about the building lease." My pulse quickened. "What about it?" "Something about new ownership and renegotiation of terms. He's in his office with Kyle right now. I've never seen him this pale." "Thanks for letting me know, Amanda." "Victoria?" She paused. "For what it's worth, everything you said last night was true. A lot of us have known it for years." After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone. The dominoes were falling exactly as I'd known they would. The question was whether I'd be able to handle watching them fall. The call came from Dad's lawyer at 10:30. He wanted to meet. Neutral location. Today, if possible. I suggested Anderson Industries conference room. I could practically hear his discomfort through the phone, but he agreed. At 2 o'clock, I walked into the building where I actually worked. Where people knew my name and valued my contributions. I was wearing my best suit, navy blue, perfectly tailored. Armor for the battlefield. Dad and Kyle were already there when I arrived. Dad looked older than he had at the party. Kyle looked angry and confused. The lawyer, a thin man named Bernard, cleared his throat. "Miss Carter, thank you for agreeing to meet. Your father has some concerns about recent developments." "The building lease," I said calmly. "I assume that's why we're here." Dad slammed his hand on the table. You knew the whole time." I met his eyes without flinching. "Knew what, Dad?" "That this company," he gestured around the room, "bought our building, that you work here, that you're behind all of this." "I'm not behind anything," I said honestly. "Anderson Industries made a standard business acquisition. The property owner wanted to sell. we wanted to buy, happens every day. Don't play games, Victoria. Kyle snapped. You're trying to destroy the family business. I turned to my brother. I tried to save the family business. Remember, when I showed Dad the evidence of your embezzlement? But nobody wanted to listen to me then. Kyle's face went red. That was a misunderstanding. It was theft, I said flatly. $75,000. Would you like me to pull up the documentation? I still have all of it. Bernard cleared his throat. Perhaps we should focus on the matter at hand. The lease terms. I leaned back in my chair, completely calm. The current lease expires in 8 months. Under the terms of the sale, the new owner, Anderson Industries, has the right to renegotiate terms or decline renewal. You can't kick us out, Dad said, his voice desperate now. That building has been Carter Mechanical's home for 35 years. Actually, I can't do anything, I corrected. I don't own Anderson Industries, I just work here. But I did negotiate something on behalf of the company. I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Dad grabbed it with shaking hands. A new lease agreement, I explained. Same square footage, same location. The rate is higher, fair market value for the area. But there are conditions. Dad flipped through the pages. What conditions? First, all employees who've been with Carter Mechanical for more than 10 years receive protection. Their positions and salaries are guaranteed for 2 years, regardless of management changes. I saw Dad's expression soften slightly. Second, a full financial audit will be conducted by an independent firm. Any irregularities must be resolved before the lease is finalized. Kyle went pale. You can't. Third, I continued, ignoring him, the company must maintain certain ethical standards. No more creative accounting, no more hidden transfers, clean books. This is blackmail, Kyle said. This is business, I replied. Take it or leave it. You have 2 weeks to decide. After that, Anderson Industries will look for a new tenant. Dad was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe I'd been invisible for so long that the real me was a stranger. The news spread through the business community within 48 hours. Carter Mechanical, the family dynasty, was at the mercy of Anderson Industries. And the person holding the cards was Charles Carter's forgotten daughter. The local business journal ran a story. Victoria Carter, from shadows to spotlight. It detailed my work at Anderson, my rise through the ranks, and the poetic justice of the situation. Phone calls poured in. Clients who'd worked with Dad called to express concern. Some sided with him. Others admitted they'd always wondered why I wasn't more involved in the business. The video from the retirement party kept circulating. People added context, shared their own stories of being overlooked by family. I'd accidentally become a symbol for something bigger than my personal grievance. Kyle posted on social media defending Dad. My father built an empire from nothing. One disgruntled ex-employee won't change that. The comments tore him apart. People dug up records of the company's declining performance since Kyle took over. They pointed out the irony of calling me an ex-employee when I was family. Someone found my college transcripts and posted them. Graduated top of my class. Certified public accountant, multiple awards for financial excellence. Next to it, they posted Kyle's resume. High school diploma. No certifications. His only qualification was being the boss's son. I watched the court of public opinion shift in real time, and I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication. Just tired. What I didn't expect was the support from Carter Mechanical's employees. People I'd worked with for years started reaching out. Amanda was the first. Victoria, I don't know if you remember me helping you with payroll sometimes, she wrote. But I want you to know that whenever there were problems, you were the one who fixed them. When Mr. Carter or Kyle made promises to employees that weren't in the budget, you found the money to keep those promises. You protected us. Then came messages from others. Tom from operations. You made sure I got my bonus when my wife was sick, even though Kyle said it wasn't approved yet. Sandra from reception. You were the only one who remembered my daughter's graduation. Marcus from the shop floor. My paycheck never bounced. Not once in 12 years. That was because of you. They started posting their stories publicly, creating a counter-narrative to Kyle's disgruntled employee claim. They weren't doing it for me. They were doing it because they were afraid. Afraid the company would collapse. Afraid they'd lose their jobs. The local news picked up the story. Reporters called asking for interviews. I declined all of them, but the narrative was already written. Victoria Carter, the overlooked daughter who'd kept the family business afloat while her father praised her brother. The woman who'd walked away rather than watch it crumble. The person who now held the keys to their future. The community had chosen a side, and it wasn't my father's. Mom called on a Tuesday evening. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Victoria," she said, and I could hear she'd been crying. "We need to talk. Just you and me." We met at a small cafe downtown, away from anywhere we might be recognized. Mom looked older, worn down in a way I'd never seen before. "I didn't know," she said immediately, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. "About Kyle, about the money, about any of it." "Mom, let me finish." She looked up at me with red eyes. "I knew your father favored Kyle. I told myself it was just his way, that he loved you both equally but showed it differently. I made excuses." A tear rolled down her cheek. "After the party, I made your father show me everything. The accounts, the reports you'd given him, all of it. You were right, Victoria. Kyle was stealing, and your father covered it up because he couldn't admit his golden boy wasn't perfect." My throat tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I failed you," she said simply. "I'm your mother. I should have stood up for you, should have demanded your father treat you fairly. Instead, I told you to be patient, to not make waves, to support your brother." She reached across the table, taking my hand. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart, for all of it." I'd imagined this moment for years, my mother finally seeing the truth, acknowledging what I'd been through. But now that it was happening, I felt hollow. "What about Dad?" I asked. "He's struggling." Mom withdrew her hand. "His pride won't let him admit he was wrong. But losing the respect of the community, watching the business struggle, realizing Kyle isn't capable of running things, it's destroying him. That's not my fault." "I know." She smiled sadly. "You tried to help, multiple times. He just wouldn't listen." We sat in silence for a while. Finally, Mom asked, "Is there any way to fix this? To bring the family back together?" I thought about the little girl who'd drawn pictures for her father, the teenager who'd brought home perfect report cards, the adult who'd worked herself to exhaustion trying to earn his approval. "I don't know, Mom," I said honestly. "I really don't know." Kyle showed up at my apartment 3 weeks after the meeting with the lawyer. He looked terrible, unshaven, rumpled clothes, eyes bloodshot. "Can I come in?" he asked when I opened the door. Every instinct told me to say no, but he was still my brother. So I stepped aside. We sat in my living room in awkward silence. Kyle kept opening his mouth like he wanted to say something, then closing it again. "The audit results came back," he finally said. "They found everything." "I know. Dad fired me." His voice cracked. His own son fired me from the family business. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction. This was Kyle getting what he deserved. But looking at my brother, really looking at him, I just felt sad. "You stole $75,000, Kyle." "I know." He put his head in his hands. "I don't even have a good excuse. I thought I deserved it, for all the hard work." "Hard work?" I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. "I worked twice as hard as you and never took a penny that wasn't mine." "I know." He looked up, and his eyes were wet. "You were always smarter than me, better at the business. Dad knew it too. That's why he pushed me so hard, gave me chances. He was trying to make me into something I'm not." This was more self-awareness than Kyle had shown in his entire life. "And now?" I asked. "Now I'm broke. Wife left me. Dad won't talk to me. The whole town thinks I'm a criminal." He laughed bitterly. "Hell, I am a criminal. I just never got caught until you caught me." "You could have gotten away with it," I said quietly, "if you just listened when I tried to tell Dad. Would you have let me?" Honest question. Deserved an honest answer. "No, probably not." Kyle nodded slowly. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I needed you to know I finally understand. What you went through, being invisible, not mattering. It's hell, isn't it?" "Yes," I said. "It is." He stood to leave. At the door he turned back. "For what it's worth, Vicky, I'm sorry, for all of it." After he left, I sat in the quiet of my apartment and cried. Not for Kyle, not for Dad, for the family we could have been if anyone had just chosen to see me. 6 months after the retirement party, Anderson Industries hosted a charity gala. Miriam insisted I'd be the guest of honor, given my role in several major acquisitions and my work mentoring young women in finance. I almost said no. Public speaking still terrified me, but Miriam wouldn't take no for an answer. The ballroom was packed with business leaders, community members, and young professionals. Standing at the podium, I felt that familiar flutter of anxiety. Then I remembered the retirement party, how I'd stood up and spoken my truth. This was easier. This was about something bigger than family drama. I want to talk about being invisible, I started. About what it means to have your work dismissed, your voice ignored, your value determined by other people's inability to see you. I talked about building your own worth, about walking away from situations that diminish you, about the difference between revenge and self-respect. I didn't take action to hurt my family, I said. I took action to save myself. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be invisible anymore. The applause was loud, but I barely heard it. Because in the back of the room, standing near the exit, was my father. Our eyes met across the distance. He looked smaller, older, defeated in a way I'd never seen him. After the speech, after the congratulations and the photos, I found him still standing there. "Hello, Dad." "Victoria." His voice was rough. "That was a good speech." "What are you doing here?" "I wasn't invited," he admitted, "but I needed to hear what you had to say." We stood in uncomfortable silence. Years of hurt between us, solid as a wall. "Can we talk?" Dad asked. "Somewhere private?" We ended up in a small meeting room off the main ballroom. Just us for the first time since the retirement party. Dad sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 63 years. "I'm not good at this," he started, apologizing, admitting I was wrong. "I know." He flinched at my tone. "Your mother made me look at everything. The files you'd shown me, the audit results, the statements from employees about how you'd protected them over the years. And I was wrong." The words seemed to physically hurt him. "About Kyle, about the business, about you most of all." "Why?" I asked. "Why couldn't you see it when I was trying to show you?" Dad was quiet for a long moment, because seeing it would mean admitting I'd failed. As a father, as a businessman. I built Carter Mechanical from nothing, Victoria. It was supposed to be my legacy, proof that I mattered. "So Kyle had to be perfect," I said slowly, understanding clicking into place. "Because if he couldn't run the business, it meant you hadn't built something sustainable. It meant you'd failed. And admitting you were better at it than him?" Dad shook his head. "That would mean I'd wasted years grooming the wrong child. That I'd ignored my daughter's talent while pushing my mediocre son to the front. So you chose pride over truth." "I chose ego over my daughter." He looked at me with wet eyes. "And I'm sorry, Victoria. I'm so deeply sorry." I'd waited 30 years to hear those words. Imagined this moment countless times. In my fantasies, his apology fixed everything. We hugged, the family healed. Reality was messier. His apology didn't erase the hurt, didn't give me back the years I'd wasted trying to earn his love, didn't change the fact that he'd only apologized after facing public consequences. But it was something. "Is this your revenge?" Dad asked quietly, "watching me lose everything?" "No, Dad." I met his eyes. "This was my freedom." I visited my childhood home one last time a week after the gala. Mom had called to say Dad wanted to give me something before they downsized. They were selling the house, couldn't afford it anymore with the business struggling. Walking through the familiar rooms felt strange, like visiting a museum of my own life. Everything was the same, but different. Smaller somehow. I found myself standing in Dad's office, the room where I'd brought him so many reports, so much evidence he'd refused to see. It looked bare now, half packed into boxes. On the wall, where company awards used to hang, I saw something that made me stop breathing. My childhood drawings. The ones I'd brought him over the years, the ones I'd found in the trash or forgotten on shelves. He'd kept them. Not just kept them. Framed them. Each one carefully preserved behind glass, arranged chronologically like an art gallery. There was the picture of our family in front of the shop, the report card from 3rd grade, a Father's Day card I'd made when I was 9, even a photo of me at my college graduation that I didn't know existed. Dad appeared in the doorway. "I found them in boxes in the attic," he said quietly. "Your mother made me go through everything after the party." I touched the frame of that first drawing, my 7-year-old self's careful crayon work. You threw this away. I know. He came to stand beside me. I threw away a lot of things I shouldn't have. I'm trying to understand why. Why I could see Kyle's potential but not yours. Why I dismissed your work while praising his mediocrity. Did you figure it out? You reminded me of myself, he said slowly. The hard worker, the one who did everything right and expected that to be enough. Kyle reminded me of the man I wanted to be, charismatic, easy with people, the life of every room. He gestured at the frames. But you were the one who actually mattered, who kept things running, who saw problems before they became disasters, and I was too blind to see it. I didn't know what to say. The apology was real, the regret was genuine, but it didn't erase 30 years of being invisible. Take them, Dad said. They were always meant for you anyway. What about your legacy? I asked. Carter Mechanical? The business will survive or it won't, he said tiredly. But I finally understand that my real legacy isn't the company, it's you. And I nearly destroyed that completely. I carefully took down the frames, one by one, evidence that I had mattered to him, even if he couldn't show it, even if he'd needed to lose everything before he could see what he'd had. Thank you, Dad, I said, and meant it. He nodded, unable to speak. As I carried the frames to my car, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. Anderson Industries finalized the deal with Carter Mechanical 3 months later. The audit had revealed the full extent of Kyle's theft, and he'd agreed to a repayment plan to avoid criminal charges. Dad stepped back in to stabilize operations, but it was clear his heart wasn't in it anymore. The new lease included terms I'd personally negotiated. Fair market rates, but with protections for long-term employees. A profit-sharing structure that rewarded the people who actually did the work, and a clause requiring transparent financial reporting. But the bigger change came from within Anderson Industries. Miriam asked me to head up a new division, a mentorship program for women in finance and business. We'd provide training, support, and advocacy for women who felt invisible in their own companies. You have a story people need to hear, Miriam told me. Use it to help others. The program launched with 15 mentees. Women who'd been overlooked, dismissed, told they weren't leadership material. I worked with each one individually, teaching them to document their value, build their confidence, and recognize when it was time to walk away. Within a year, 12 of them had been promoted. 2 had started their own businesses. 1 had taken over her family's company after her brothers nearly ran it into bankruptcy. They called me for advice, sent me updates on their progress, thanked me for seeing them when no one else would. I finally understood what it meant to build a legacy. Not through bricks and mortar, not through a family name on a building, but through the lives you touched and the people you helped rise. Dad called one evening to tell me he'd seen an article about the program. You're doing good work, Victoria, he said. His voice was proud in a way I'd waited my whole life to hear. Thanks, Dad. I wish I'd understood earlier what you were capable of, what you needed from me. Me too, I said honestly, but we can't change the past. No, he agreed, but maybe we can do better going forward. It wasn't a grand gesture, wasn't a dramatic reconciliation, just a quiet offer to try, to build something new from the ashes of what we'd lost. Maybe, I said, one day at a time. After we hung up, I looked around my office at Anderson Industries. Photos of my mentees lined one wall. Success stories and testimonials. Proof that being seen, being valued, being heard could change lives. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Just got promoted to office manager at Carter Mechanical. Never thought I'd see the day. Thank you for everything. I smiled. The ripples kept spreading. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, 6 months later. Carter Mechanical's New Beginning Celebration. Under new management structure, with employee ownership and transparent operations. Dad had transformed the business into something different, something better. Employees had stakes. Decisions were made collectively. The old hierarchy had been flattened. Kyle wasn't part of it. He'd moved to another state, started over in a different field. We texted occasionally. Careful, distant, but no longer enemies. Just 2 people who'd survived the same dysfunction and were trying to heal in different ways. I almost didn't go to the celebration, but Mom called personally. It won't be the same without you, sweetheart. Please come. So I went. Not to the main event, but early, when the room was still being set up. Dad was there adjusting chairs, fussing over details. Victoria, he looked surprised. You came. Mom guilt-tripped me, I said with a small smile. He laughed, actually laughed. She's good at that. We stood there awkwardly. Then Dad pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. I've been carrying this around, waiting for the right moment. Might as well be now. I opened it carefully. Inside were legal documents, stock certificates, a letter on company letterhead. I'm transferring my remaining shares to you, Dad explained. Not to punish Kyle or make some grand gesture, but because this company survived because of you, it should belong to you. My hands shook as I read. 40% ownership of Carter Mechanical. Enough to have real say in decisions. Enough to protect the employees I'd fought for. Enough to ensure the business stayed true to its new values. Dad, You don't have to accept, he interrupted. I know I don't deserve to make this gesture after everything, but I need you to know. I see you now, Victoria. I see what you built, what you protected, what you sacrificed. This is my way of saying thank you, and I'm sorry, and you were right all along. I looked at my father, this flawed, proud man who'd finally learned to admit his mistakes. The journey had cost us both so much. Years we'd never get back. Trust that would take time to rebuild. But standing there, holding proof that I mattered, that my work had value, that my father finally saw me, I felt something unexpected. Peace. For the one who always saw the truth, I read from his handwritten note at the bottom of the letter. Even when I couldn't, Dad added quietly. I folded the papers carefully and put them back in the envelope. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. As I turned to leave, Dad called out. Victoria? Yeah, I'm proud of you. I should have said it years ago. I should have said it every day. But I'm saying it now. I'm so proud of the woman you've become. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Those were the words I'd waited 30 years to hear. They didn't fix everything, didn't erase the pain, but they mattered. Walking out of that building, the one Anderson Industries owned, the one where I'd fought so many battles, the one that represented both my greatest hurt and my ultimate triumph, I felt lighter. My phone buzzed. A mentee asking for advice. Another sending photos from her promotion celebration. A third thanking me for believing in her. I'd spent my life being invisible, trying to earn recognition from someone who couldn't see me. Now I used that experience to make sure others felt seen, valued, heard. That was my legacy. Not revenge, not bitterness, but transformation. I'd turned my pain into purpose, my silence into strength, my invisibility into a spotlight for others. And finally, after all these years, I could look in the mirror and see what I'd always been. Enough. More than enough. Exactly what I was meant to be.